You have failed me for the last time. Hmm? Oh, hi. I'm OmnusI A. Welcome to the Lair of OmnusI A, round 2. Later. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once more to the Lair of OmnusI A, and happy Halloween to those of you who are getting this on the right day. I am OmnusI A, your host, dressed up a little bit for the occasion. It may be no surprise to you, enjoy Halloween probably more than any other holiday. I love the pageantry, the costuming, the parties, let's be honest, and all of the atmosphere and ambiance that goes into Halloween. I love the idea of, for a brief time, us taking away from our so serious days and enjoying ourselves in a little fantasy and whimsy, where we can dress up and not be mocked for it. Now, as you may not have seen me for a bit of a while, I thought it would be a good thing to come back in on a topic about gaming in general and having a good time, and this seemed to be the ideal time for this. Today we're going to talk about something that not only relates to role-playing games, but also to having a good time with costumes, trick-or-treating, and the like. So, as today is my Halloween episode, let's talk about props and costuming and gaming. Now, props in gaming are something, fairly simple. It's all of the other things that you can use in a game besides the absolute mechanical necessities. Character sheets, pencils, dice, books. Everything else is something of a prop. Even miniatures in three-dimensional terrain are a kind of prop. But what I'm going to be talking about largely are the other things that sometimes game masters will bring to the table to try to ensnare the imaginations of their players and bring the game to a little extra level of realism, or at least to try to draw players into the game a bit more. That can be difficult when the person that you're looking across from looks nothing like the Dark Lord that you're supposed to be having an epic duel with. But I'm talking about all of the little things, and we'll be going step by step, covering the advantages and disadvantages of various props. The first kind of prop that I'd like to bring up is costuming, because, well, it's already fresh in your mind, isn't it? From this rather nice-looking doublet to this costuming crown, costumes can be a relatively easy way to step into character and enjoy adding something a little bit out of the ordinary in a game. I myself use costuming to a certain extent. I have a variety of gaming t-shirts. One of my favorite ones, Dragon Skull in the front, says Dungeon Master, established 1974, which is doubly entertaining. Of course, Dungeons & Dragons was, I believe, first published in 1974 as one of the first role-playing games. And I was also established in 1974, being born then, so it works both ways, quite honestly. I also have a variety of other gaming t-shirts, so that when I'm playing, I have shirts that are at least somewhat tangential to the game. I have a fun gelatinous cube shirt, or shirts with dragons on them. One of those Dungeons & Dragons shirts, Let's summon demons. It's a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Satanic Panic. Got from Hot Topic a while ago. So there's lots of different costume-light things that you can do that take about as much effort as a person does wearing a blue long-sleeve shirt that they put a big M on the front in white paint to go as a blue M&M. They don't take a lot, but that little bit of extra effort does add something to the atmosphere if you are wearing something that is not your everyday garb. With the Dungeon Master shirt, it makes me feel a little bit like I have that separation from the rest of the players, that they understand that I'm the narrator, I'm the one who takes care of the rules, I am their guide through the world, and I know I'm not saying it's a major impact because my players are intelligent people and they're not going to be tamed by the fact that I'm wearing a t-shirt. They choose to cooperate willingly for the most part, so it's not necessary, but I think it adds a little bit. Hats, in case you haven't noticed, I do enjoy hats. Hats are also an easy way of bringing a little something to the game. For instance, when I was running a game in the Princes of the Apocalypse and the players were taking on the water cultists, I have this somewhat silly looking octopus hat. If you've seen any other videos that are also on this channel, you may have seen this hat. And it's a funny hat, but at the same time it also kind of served to symbolize that they are going up against the water cult, and that the master of this force himself was a barnacle-encrusted human who had been transformed by the powers of water, and that their cultists wear outlandish clothing. Hence the hat. I don't know if it gave them any extra satisfaction to beat the water cultists, but I thought it was a nice touch. And as I have many, many hats, it gives me many opportunities to invoke different things. Although, because I don't like breaking up the flow of the game here in my home game space, I generally limit it to one hat that I wear through the occasion, or else I slip back into some other hat that I more commonly wear. My OmnusI hat that I wear, my rather battered leather adventurer's hat, is another example of that degree of separation that I get by costuming and showing that when I'm wearing this hat, I'm all business. I am serious. I am the master of the game, and I expect compliance. This works well with groups that I don't have a great deal of experience with. I'm mostly looking at my hobby shop gamers for my once-a-month game that I run at the local hobby shop. I expressly tell them, when I'm wearing this hat, you are to be quiet, you are to listen to me, and I am the game master at that point. For that game, I slip into different hats and props to help them imagine and immerse themselves in the game a little bit more. I don't find that it takes much time away from the game, especially when I can walk over to a table where the props are already prepared, take off my hat, put another one on, turn around, and immediately get into the character. It helps me to get into the character, and it also helps them to perhaps look beyond myself as I look every day, and perhaps imagine with a little voice and a simple prop that they are dealing with somebody completely different and dealing in character with somebody completely different. That makes all the difference. I don't want them necessarily to respond as what they would respond as. I want them to respond as their character would in that moment. And sometimes a prop helps to crystallize that perception. With costuming, it's easy to go too far. You know, your average cosplay costume, for instance, can be very involved. And at the game, you don't want to wear anything that's going to limit your ability to run or play the game. I wouldn't wear anything, for example, that completely enclosed my hands. I'd have a harder time picking up dice and so on, and that's just a level I'm not really willing to get into. I may have an infinity glove oven mitt, but if I'm role-playing as Thanos, I might not use that unless I really have to, because I don't like to disrupt my ability to pick up dice and cards and whatnot. So, that's what costuming does for you. Don't go too far, but a few things here and there can really help. And, of course, if you want to go full in, there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the privacy of your own home, or the Game Master's home. Some people really like the idea of getting dressed up and in character. And, of course, if you're playing a game like a LARP, where you are actually living and breathing as the character in the time that you're in the game space, the costuming almost becomes essential. That person who is dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, they don't mean to, but they're actually taking other people out of the fantasy, forcing them to work extra hard to imagine that person as being bedecked in chainmail armor with a sword in hand. It's part of the mutual kind of social contract that everybody participates in to a certain extent, and those that participate the most help everybody out around them. So, that's costuming. It's nice to do, not essential ever, but it's nice to have that as an option. Now, as far as weaponry, I have a simple rule: no real weapons at the game table. Accidents happen, and while I have a variety of very real weapons, they are all safely kept on the other side of the room in their trophy case. I don't encourage players to walk around the table with actual naked swords out, or even in scabbards. The temptation to take it and whack somebody with it is too good. And even if they wouldn't whack somebody with it, if they were just playing and that person moved wrong, there could be a tragic occurrence. So I strongly recommend against actual weapons being at the table. However, prop weapons, foam or plastic, can be useful in the right circumstances. I wouldn't say let players run around with plastic weapons, because now they have something else that they're concentrating on besides the game. That can easily go too far. But if you want to evoke a certain feeling or sensation, and say you're playing Warhammer 40,000, it's one thing to describe the roar of the bolters and the whir and drone of the chainsword, but if you actually pull out a chainsword and you can demonstrate that somebody is just getting skewered with one, and again, leave accessibility up so it's not a distraction, but having a prop to describe gameplay can be useful in small doses. Again, as long as it doesn't become a distraction. That's the important thing with these. Also, getting better quality ones generally makes them look better and survive better. Something like these foam ones are vastly superior to the plastic ones, but of course they're more expensive. Now, if you do have a prop and you want to get the most out of it, it's a good idea to, again, use it extremely sparingly. I wouldn't pull out the Warhammer and describe how a person is splattering goblins. Instead, what I might do is, if I'm in a circumstance and the situation is possibly a little dicey, I might have a player stand up, hand them the Warhammer, and say, all right, describe to me how you're going to fight off that ogre. And I might use what they say, or at least what they intend for their character to do, in my narration. Make them feel like it's important that I did that. For instance, if the group is breaching through a door, and the person has a Warhammer, which is a terrible weapon to breach with because it's a swinging weapon, isn't it? You don't want to try going through a confined space with a weapon like this. You can make do with something like a spike set into it, but it's not ideal. So in order to evoke that little bit of a dilemma, you might say, all right, here's the doorway, here's your weapon, how are you going through? And if they're like, I'm going to go through with it tucked up on my shoulder and charge through, well, you can talk about how if they swing, their blows are constricted and constrained. They might succeed despite that, because their characters are very strong or very skilled, but it's something for them mentally to think about. So they might think, as much as my dwarf loves hammers, perhaps having a good sword around to drive through might sometimes be better. And hey, you just evoked a little bit of realism in your fantasy game. Fancy that. So that is a good thing to use prop weapons for. Highlighting and describing your world, making it a little bit more rich for your players. Again, break these out sparingly. I wouldn't recommend it. Number one, if accidents happen, somebody's going to get caught in the face with a Warhammer, and even a plastic one can leave a bit of a blow. Also, if they lose the willpower not to swing it at something, they can break rather easily. So prop weapons are fine, limited in small doses. Now, I am highly, highly for making props. For example, scrolls that you can put maps on. Relatively simple thing to do. Game masters have been doing it forever. Whether it comes from taking the time to masterfully etch out and draw detailed maps. There are some gamers who are extraordinarily good at that. My colleague and comrade, Tim Harper, for instance, I'll give him a shout out. He draws amazing maps. Has far more skill in that than I do. And he makes maps that form the cornerstone of mega dungeons and the like. Some truly excellent things. Also, Dyson Logos makes very, very nice maps, and I've been impressed with his work as well. But there's an art to going beyond just the drawing. Of course, if you start out with white paper, oftentimes you can get that nice aged parchment effect by taking the paper and soaking it in tea water. The tannins from the tea soak into the parchment and give it an uneven layering that resembles classic parchment. Now, you can still go out and get actual parchment. It's a little expensive, but not terribly. A good parchment or stationery store should have it. I have some for resume use, but also occasionally important character sheets. So you can get some rather nice paper off the bat, but people have been using just plain white paper forever, just doing that. Also, another art is taking a candle and singeing the edges to make it look like it's been through a bit. A little bit of fire here, maybe burning through a part that it's going to make the players wonder what was actually there. Then when you're finished, you can crumple it up if you wish to really give it the distressed look. Pull it out, take a look at it, see if it's got the look that you're looking for. We have been artificially making legitimate maps and parchments for ages since this whole gaming thing started. Practicing with a few pieces before you actually make one that you're going to use in your game will give you some, again, practice. Makes almost everything better. Also, if you have the moxie to practice a little with an actual ink pen, if you can practice a little calligraphy, adding script to your messages that you're going to hand out to players as a handout, can be a nice touch. It allows you to do all kinds of little embellishments that you would have a hard time doing on a printer font, for instance. That is the reason why I got into calligraphy, and while I'm hardly a master, I can certainly make some very nice pieces that, again, will cause your players to look at it and be excited about the idea of having this artifact of the game in their very hands. Now, you can go too far with these things, too. Try to keep things in perspective. If I have a book like this, which currently houses the notes from my campaign for my hobby shop games, but, it looks pretty and everything. And if I hand this out to players as the journal of the NPC that they just got finished killing, say he was a bandit, and they open it up and, my goodness, the entire thing is full, they'll be like, he wrote this? Oh, yes. And they can go over and pour through this. Would it break your heart that they flipped to the very end of it to look at the last 3 pages to see the parts that actually apply to your game? It would be pretty tragic. I mean, you could put a nice short story's worth of journal entries into something like this, and only at the end have something of use, and your players won't care about the journal except for what they can get out of it. You would have been just as far ahead giving them an investigation test, showing them that he had this very nice looking book, and then letting them have an investigation check to find the crucial bits of information their characters actually care about. Now, if you are going to craft a campaign, and you're going to put all kinds of hints and notes and things that will come true or be useful throughout the campaign in a book such as that, well, it's a sacrifice for your art, for the time that it will take to do that. But what you may end up with is a prop that will enjoy a favored place in the mementos of your campaign worlds for a long time to come. especially if you put a lot of love, care, and craft into something like that. In that case, most people would not say that that would be a waste of time. They would say that you really cared a lot about your world and making it real, and if you gave that to the players so that they could refer to it through the entirety of the campaign, well, again, they'll remember that they had that guide in their hands and were reading it as their characters would, and getting these insights about their campaign world. That is an incredible use of a prop. Few people have the kind of time and care to put into something like that. But honestly, if you know you're going to be telling a campaign months into the future, or a year into the future, say, well, if you start now, it might not be that bad in the end. So, certainly a possibility. Another thing that I enjoy is handing out props as stand-ins for items that characters might find in real life. Sometimes that can be quite useful. For instance, if I have water skin. Standard common affair. Filled with water. Most people wouldn't think twice about something like this. But if I hand a player this water skin, their minds are immediately going to go, there's something special about this water skin. This must mean something. They're going to pay special note to it. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want to betray that trust and make it be absolutely nothing. But if this is how I give out a volatile magic potion, for instance, and the first time they uncork it, say poisonous vapors issue out, perhaps a genie in college who couldn't afford a proper lamp got stuck into a water flask. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that you could do with something like this. And the fact that you are, your average person doesn't deal with a water skin every day. When you hand them that extra thing, again, you're putting that player in the perspective of their character. Oh, I just found this, and while I deal with water skins from time to time, what does this do? What does this mean? Could this be something special? And as far as a prop goes, that's exactly what you want to do with one. So something like that can be very, very handy. Sometimes you will find just the perfect item that will look like what you want, or that might evoke something that you are striving for. Sometimes you have to use your imagination a little bit. If I really want to have some sort of a spell component pouch, but say my character isn't evil, I might still let a player have something like this so that they can understand what having some sort of a pouch for their spell components is going to be like. Although the chains and demon skull and bat wings motif may not fit exactly what their character would normally be thinking. Still, just having this might be enough to, again, give them a sense of the feeling of what I want them to feel. Having that attachment to something that makes their everyday casting and usage feel important. To feel that if this is gone, they can't do their magic anymore, well, maybe they'll understand a little bit about what their character always having to carry this spell component pouch around feels like to them. So, again, bonding with your character. Finally, the props that we can take for granted all the time. Things like miniatures, things like 3D dungeon elements, battle mats. They're all props. Technically, you can run games all over the place with nothing more than the powers of your imagination and the mind of the game master to direct where everything is. And also, especially if the players are very quick at coming up with ideas on the fly that the game master can roll with. Like, you're in a warehouse, you're fighting, the player says, I want to hide behind a crate. The dungeon master thinks, well, yes, there are crates. So yes, you can hide behind that crate without having to draw out anything. It's possible. However, if you want to indulge in a more tactical style of gameplay, then having three-dimensional elements can be invaluable. It helps the players to imagine the situation that their characters are in and make wiser decisions for what their characters would do in a given situation if they can actually see what that situation looks like. It's a lot easier to imagine the threat level of a given monster if you can see what the monster looks like. To the scale of what the monster should be, you would learn to fear a giant dragon just because you can see it and you can look at it and see the menace and see how sharp those teeth are and how the claw is ready to come down and eviscerate the character. You invoke a sense of connection to the players, to their characters, working in conjunction to make your game stronger. Is it required? No. None of this is required. You can be in your t-shirt and jeans or sweatpants and a sweater, whatever you want. You can play these games and still enjoy them every bit as much. But what I find is that props are just a little handy tool to help you to get your players into the mindset that you want to more fully embrace the adventure that you are putting forth. And that works on everyone, from children to adults, I dare say probably even the elderly. As long as it's not foolish, as long as you are not dragging down the game and possibly countering some of what they come for. If you're insisting on dressing up in costume and they're just there for a tactical engagement where they want to battle and use their wits, to some extent all of the extra pageantry might be a disservice. It's important, like in many things, to know your customers, to know your players, to have some idea of what's appropriate and what isn't. Everything in moderation, just enough so that everybody has a good time. If the props make for a better time, then 100% go for it. Absolutely. If you're only doing it to entertain yourself and your players really would rather have not done anything with it, reel your tastes in a little bit, perhaps. Or ask and communicate. Communication is always good. What is appropriate? What didn't you like about what I proposed? And go on from there. Make your game better, stronger. So, props in gaming, just like walking around in Halloween. And do you need all of the weapons to walk around in Halloween? No, you don't. My son just discovered this a little bit when he insisted on manning his candy station with 5 or 6 Nerf guns, which he couldn't use them all at once. They were just draped around. Had he tried to carry all of that, it would have been a colossal mess. Instead, as I told him, a single thing is just as evocative without having to be a hindrance and an encumbrance. That's the lesson that I hope you learn. Props are great. Props are wonderful. But only in as much as they actually add to what you're trying to do. So, with all of that, I suppose I could find some treasure in here for you, eh? I told you I had the Infinity Gauntlet. This was a little something from Loot Crate. I did Loot Crate for a little while until I realized that almost everything that came in Loot Crate was junk. Just collectibles I really didn't want or need, and very few things that I really, really enjoyed. This was one of the things that I really, really enjoyed. It's an oven mitt that doesn't work. They actually tried to recall this because this is actually not safe to use in an oven. This can burn or heat can go right through it. It's rather thin and flimsy. But I keep it because it's the Infinity Gauntlet, and I like that. So, but I do have it. And for those of you who have Loot Crate, I hope you enjoy all of the things that it gives you. I just found no value in it. Or relatively little value. But I have the Infinity Gauntlet. Huzzah! I believe that by the power of the Infinity Gauntlet, all of you deserve 25 Lair points. And if you're asking yourself, Rob, why do you do Lair points? Why do you give out things in the course of a game? Because I have at least one player who does keep track of that. And I have at least one viewer who does know what all of those things are. And someday, more people will let me know that they do. But it's enough that even one person knows what I put out and what I give. And that gives me an incredible amount of accomplishment and pleasure, just that one person pays attention enough. And if more of you do, then God bless. But, as I said, I have the Infinity Gauntlet. I think that you should have the Infinity Gauntlet as well. Not the proper Infinity Gauntlet, especially since that's Disney's, so they don't share. But on your character sheet, you can have a golden begemmed gauntlet, golden begemmed gauntlet of magic, and it probably has some interesting powers. But like this oven mitt, it also might come up a bit short if you have your expectations set too high. So you can write that down on your character sheet as well. If you ever play with me as OmnusI, just let me know you have it. And one item per session, you can perhaps have just the item that might get you out of the fire just when you need it. Think about it. You have access to a whole pool of all of these potential magical items that I've given out. Just write that on your character sheet. And if you ever happen to attend a gaming session with OmnusI, or even Rob, most of the time I'll let Rob go too, you can have a magical item. You may not know what it does, but I do. And that's the important thing. So, until next time, thank you very much for joining me here in the Lair. We're back in business. Starting in November, we're going to be putting out videos quite often. So, thank you for your patience. I respect, admire, and thank all of you sincerely for staying with me for this time and hopefully enjoying my content. It gives me a great deal of satisfaction knowing there are people out there who do enjoy these things that we do and keeps the gaming hobby strong, vibrant, and full of creative, wonderful people like yourselves. So, thank you and farewell.